Well, good morning. Welcome to this debate. My name's Tom Bentley, and I'm your moderator for this session. We will run till about 12:15, and our topic is sharing success. While we're sharing, please feel free to share electronically. The hashtag for this session is Wise Success, as you can see. And I'd like to have as much conversation between our speakers and all of you as possible. We're surrounded by innovations at this conference in particular, and everyone here brings their own direct experience and perspective on innovation and what matters about it in education. What we'll try to focus on in this session is not how to generate an innovation that works in some particular context, but really how to spread those innovations in a way that is most effective. And I'll elaborate on that a bit further in a moment. But before we get into the real content, I'd like our distinguished speakers to introduce themselves, just to tell us who they are, where they come from, the kind of work they do, and then we'll develop the theme of the session and begin a conversation with them.
Thank you, Tom. My name is Manuel Manrique. I come from Colombia. I am the regional director of an organization called International Center for Education and Development, and I'm delighted to be here with you.
Good morning. Joe Parks from the Cristo Rey Network in the United States. I'm chairman of the Cristo Rey Network Board, and I'm president of Cristo Rey New York High School.
Good morning. My name is Sheetal Mehta. I'm the executive director and trustee of K.C. Mahindra Education Trust. We support the education of underprivileged girls in India.
Thank you very much. So, as I said, there are hundreds and thousands of innovations flying around. There are many different kinds of specific innovation in education that we know can have a powerfully positive effect, whether it's a new approach to learning and teaching, a new organizational model, a specific application of technology, or something entirely different. But we know, partly because of the statistics and the forms of need that we've been discussing in this conference, that better application of innovation is desperately needed if we're going to meet learning needs and to fulfill learning rights around the world. I think it's arguable that the world of education is not short of innovations, but perhaps it is arguable, and we could discuss and argue further, that those innovations are not applied in the right places at the right times. We've looked at many specific examples, and our panelists are directly experienced in growing and spreading some specific examples that we'll talk more about. But if our challenge is to find better ways of spreading and making innovation effective, how should we be doing it? Should we be looking to see the most powerful learning innovations going to scale in the same way that the motor car or the tablet computer have? Should governments and people in authority who run public systems be mandating that everybody is required to adopt the most effective innovation? And is there not a contradiction in terms with trying to spread innovation in that way? Or do we need an entirely different kind of language and a quite different set of tools and practices in order to incorporate what works best and the best potential application of what we are learning about how to educate? Do we need an entirely different toolkit in order to be able to adopt and adapt successfully? Those are the issues that we talked about in yesterday's workshop, and came up with some interesting and some promising answers, both about what are the barriers and where we should look for the elements of a more systematic agenda. But as I said, I think the best way to develop that conversation is to try and ground it in our practical experiences and to see what lessons we can build up from there. And I want to start with you, Shita, asking a specific question. The project Nanikali that you have been responsible for shaping is already delivering education, remedial education, to 80,000 girls in 9 states in India. That's quite an impressive scale. So how did you find a way, and what lessons did you learn in trying to develop an innovation and make it one that could work in so many different local settings?
Firstly, I think it's important to understand that the girls that we are supporting are from very rural and tribal areas in India. They come from very marginalized communities. And access to learning opportunities in these schools, in these areas, is really limited. There are schools in these villages and the places where they're living, but should you go and visit the school, you'll find that there are some children in the classroom, but what you will find missing are girls, and also very often the teacher. Now, we've already heard in many of the sessions over here that, you know, in countries like India, and in rural areas, household work, fetching water really become the responsibility of the girl child and take priority over going to school. But should the girls even go to school, we've seen that they don't acquire even the basic learning competencies and skills which will allow them to lead a productive life later. And very often this is because the government school teachers are not present in the classroom, because these teachers are really hired and recruited from the bigger cities and they're not held accountable. So they remain absent for days on and and they're not in the classroom. So what Nanikali does is we provide remedial education in the form of academic support classes, which happen after school hours, where concepts of maths, language, and science are taught to the girls so that they can attain grade specific competency levels. And these are completely free. We also provide material support in the form of uniforms, school books, and hygiene material so that the girls can attend school with dignity. Now, how did we really reach what would I attribute to how we managed to scale up to 80,000? I would say it's basically the innovative pedagogy that we used in the academic support class, which is based on learning from peers and using the support of trained facilitators. And these are youth from the local community, and because it's very difficult to find qualified teachers in these areas. So the curriculum is creative. We basically reinforce academic concepts, and we use a cooperative, reflective approach, which is based on group learning, interactive group learning. And the value of this is that it lies in the dynamics, the group dynamics, which are played out in the classroom, where the girls are grouped in small groups of 3 to 4, and you encourage them to listen to each other, ask questions, restate their points of view, and this develops thinking skills, higher thinking skills. So what we found is that this can be replicated and has been implemented in 9 states, in 2,500 classrooms, and the setting could be an urban classroom, it could be a rural classroom, it could be even a tribal classroom where there's no electricity. So we don't rely on technology, because there is no access to technology. And also, in India, we have a multitude of languages. So we've managed to adapt it to various languages. Further, it's also cost effective, because the facilitators are from the local community. So it's just a matter of training them. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you. So you put a lot into the power of the pedagogy itself. It's obviously a very focused design, but it's one which is relatively simple in the sense that it can be adapted and adjusted and then applied in all these different settings.
Absolutely.
The other thing that strikes me is that while you describe tremendously diverse settings, there's a very clear need there, a social need, universal to what's happening to girl children in those settings. which means that you can perhaps get a response from the local community when you offer a specific and a practical way of dealing with that need?
Yeah, I think there are challenges, of course, because when you ask the community to not only send their girls to school, but you're asking them to come for 1 hour later, to spend 1 hour more in the school, then there is going to be a huge lot of challenges. So one way we battled it is by providing the incentive of material support. So they got uniform school books. But more than that, what I think is when the parents see that their girls are learning, then they are far more inclined to send them to school. But if they see in the government schools they're not learning, then they would rather they do the more useful work of household chores.
Right. Thank you. Okay. So Joe, let me turn to you now. You're the president of a school network. Cristo Rey has 25 high schools, 25. I think. The model, as we've already seen and heard this week, is one which is powerful in part because of the way that it integrates real work for the students into their experience of the curriculum, the educational ethos, and also the finances of the school. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you got that to a point where it could be happening in 25 high schools around the US?
The original Cristo Rey School opened in Chicago in 1996. And from my understanding, I was not involved in that. There was no real thought at that time that the model would be brought up to scale and replicated in other cities. But the original school got a lot of publicity. People were very attracted to its mission to provide an excellent, rigorous college preparatory education to young men and women from low-income families in our inner cities. And they were intrigued by the uniqueness of our model, that each student would work 1 day a week in entry-level clerical jobs in major corporations. And that would account for approximately 50% of the operating costs of the school. So the initial school got a lot of publicity, and groups in cities like Portland, Oregon, Los Angeles, and Denver, Colorado, asked if they could create a similar kind of school. That happened. Then the leaders of those schools and the gentleman who really made the replication possible by creating a sunset foundation, money that had to be spent within a certain amount of time, got together and they created 10 mission effectiveness standards. So they said if any group wants to come and start a school like Cristo Rey in Chicago, they had to agree to live up to these mission effectiveness standards. And then the Gates Foundation got involved, and the Gates Foundation does not give money to individual schools, but just to networks. So a network was created. And then they decided that, well, before a new group would come in, they would have to undertake a sophisticated feasibility process. So they would do that at a local level and then go to the national network and ask for permission to join this network. I think what drove the expansion initially was the attractiveness of the mission and the uniqueness of the mission. There is a huge problem in inner cities in the USA with low-income kids not getting appropriate and rigorous college preparatory education. For example, of low-income students in the United States, of every 100 that start high school, only 61 graduate from high school, only 40 start college, and only 9 graduate from college 6 years after they start. So those statistics are really horrible, and they basically result in the vast majority of students who grow up in low-income families being condemned to be low-income adults themselves. And that is a major social and moral issue in our country. So that's how really our replication started. We realized in about 2005, 2006 that we had grown too quickly, that the academic program in our schools was weak, given our vision of having all our students attend college and graduate from college. So we slowed down expansion. We created an educational enrichment initiative, which has dramatically upgraded the educational programs in our schools and resulted, I think, in a lot greater success.
So let me interrupt you there, because that's great, and it's opening up a whole series of questions. But I mean, the first striking similarity is that very different settings as nations, but in your case too, there was a specific social need which was felt in many different communities in the US, which meant that there was a response to the potential of this model and a demand to make it work. But partly what you're saying is, in scaling up quite quickly, there wasn't necessarily the capacity to make sure that it grew with quality.
Absolutely. And I think we learned from that. And now, for example, the feasibility studies, they're much more detailed and they're much more rigorous. So a local group, for example, we have groups now in about 6 or 7 cities that have feasibility studies underway. And frankly, not all of them are going to make it, because some of them, at least in one case, has not met the metrics that we require. So we've learned from experience that you can't rush into starting a new school on our model.
Thank you. Now, Manuel, you've been involved in many different projects, but the one that we talked about particularly yesterday was the creation and the growth of a school in the city of Medellin in Colombia, which is a community that's ravaged by violence and drugs and poverty, and where the basic service provision is very minimal. The project that you described was the development of a whole school, something that could serve the whole community, and appeared to have mobilized and inspired a whole different set of social expectations from that wider community. So can you tell us a bit about how you managed to achieve the development of that project at that kind of scale?
Yes, thank you. But before I tell you that story, I would like to congratulate Father Joe and Cristo Rey because of the WISE Award. That made us happy also. I brought this story not because I am involved in that organization. It is because when I was invited to WISE, I went out looking for things that might be interesting for the purpose of this debate. Tom mentioned the main features. It is a community of about 120,000 people affected by violence, displaced people of Afro-American descent that came from the coastal areas to live in that section. And there is an NGO in that area of Medellin that has been working there for 31 years. And they involve very much its organization with the community, very tight relationship with the community built through these years. They had already experiences running a school, providing services, and getting a close relationship with the people. They identified the need for a new school, and they went for it, but not putting in front the construction of the school. It was building an educational project with the community, for the community, not just for the students, but also for the people, because that's a felt need in that community. They looked for support to build a school that finally had a cost at $1.5 million. That was made possible because of all kinds of donations, lawyers, architects, service providers, all kinds of people contributed to make that school possible. It will benefit, as I said, 550 students. It will be inaugurated now on December 15th after a period of construction of 11 months. Not one day the construction was stopped because of the prevailing violence in that region, which is really outstanding. So in synthesis, what is this school meaning for the community? It has earned the respect of the gangs that operate in that region, linked to narco trafficking and to extortion. It has built a center for community development that includes the educational needs of the people. It has brought all the experience of a very intense and wide social mobilization that brought the resources to build the physical part of this project, which is the school. It has also brought an innovative curriculum, which is the most important part. You can have a wonderful building, but a bad school. The purpose is to have a school that responds to the needs of the students and the community and sends a very strong message to the government, because it tells the government, this is how you do things. You don't design a school and send the model and it's built by someone and then that's the whole thing. It was designed with the participation of the community and the students, and the final result is a level of ownership by the community, by the students, and by all the people that contributed to this project.
Thank you very much. So, again, there's a lot in there, but one of the things that comes out very clearly is that to find a way of creating the capacity to deliver this school just as a project, as a physical project in the first instance, you actually drew on that community engagement to draw in specialized skills and capabilities that were not then being utilized for educational purposes.
Right. I think that the key of this is that innovation is not necessarily new. It can be new, not innovative for the purposes we want. You know, the formula is very old. The way to get engaged with community, the sense of ownership they develop, the way they feel that they are doing is tackling a very essential aspect of their everyday life. School is not just go there and fill your memory with things you read. It is the whole process of moving forward, being effective and active, and resolving the problems that the community is really feeling, and students participate in that.
Terrific, thank you. There's a good question here that's come in on the tweets, and I'll ask each of you if you want to respond to it, and then we'll see whether anyone wants to raise a point and ask a question in the audience. I mean, each of you gives a very clear and quite compelling narrative of how this thing happened, but I would bet that the practical experience of doing it is a bit messier, and the effort to find a way of taking a project like each of yours in a particular direction and finding the scale that it needs and that it deserves is in itself a bit like a trial and error process. So the question is, what questions do people forget to ask when replicating other models? Joe, do you want to kick off?
Well, I think the one question that we forgot to ask was standards. If we are going to be a network of school, what are the standards that we have to abide by? Now, I mentioned initially we had mission effectiveness standards, and they were basically all about what is our mission. They were very compelling. They did mention, that it would be a college preparatory curriculum, but there was nothing about what does that mean in the concrete to have a college preparatory curriculum. What are the standards? For example, we want to send our students to highly selective and most selective colleges and universities. So where do we have to get them? They come in behind grade level. How much work do we have to do with them academically, and what kind of work to get them ready to go, for example, to Georgetown University, which has made great, extraordinary efforts to attract our students. So when they're going to be doing that, we have to provide students who will be able to handle their rigorous curriculum. And I don't think we ask questions like that early on.
Thank you. Thank you. Manuel, what other questions?
Yes. I think that people doesn't always take into account all the resources available that are in front of you, but you don't necessarily see that they can serve for your purposes. And so that is one huge thing that you have to do. But beyond that, I think you have to draw from the available knowledge, experience, and wisdom. And nowadays, the big change is that we have technology in our favor. To do that school, it was essential to see what others were doing, because the particular aspect of this experience is that it's an NGO taking on a project that means a construction of 1.5 million. States can do that, companies can do that, but an NGO engaged with the community doing such a thing, it's something very new. So I think that they did a couple of right questions at the right moment.
Thank you. Shita.
I think the question that we actually forgot to ask ourselves, we were so excited that we had managed to do so well at primary school level that we decided to take it up to the secondary school, up to the 10th standard. So then girls would be independent enough and empowered. But at the higher classes, the support of learning facilitators is not sufficient. You do need academically qualified teachers, and that's exactly what there is a shortage of. So then we had to really learn, and we learned the hard way, and now we have some mobile teachers who come in, and we've got a hub and spoke model. But it was something we forgot to ask ourselves.
Okay, so you found that you had to undertake a specific adaptation in order to extend the model up the age range.
Right, exactly.
I was going to say, too, the question that we didn't ask, there's a large difference between adopting and adapting. And we were very happy, you know, that so many groups around the United States wanted to adopt our model. But we didn't ask, how much are we going to let each school adapt our model? And we've had major issues over the years over adaptation. And one of the things also that we didn't ask is, I think in any kind of franchising organization or bringing something up to scale, the founders have created the model. And how much are they willing to let go of the way they created their model and let another group adapt it?
Thank you. That question of how much adaptation and what role adaptation plays in successful scaling is one that I'd like to see if we can discuss further. But we have a couple of questions and points. Can we start in the front here? And if you wouldn't mind saying who you are.
I'm Helene Terwijnen. I'm from the Netherlands, and I'm the founder of a school for extracurricular education called the Weekend School. And my question is not on the content, but basically on the organization and the expansion of it. I started with one school, obviously. We now have 9 in the Netherlands. And all the people of those 9 weekend schools are on my payroll of my foundation. We have our own quality measures. We go to the places and see where they fall behind and where amendments need to be made. But now others want to adopt and adapt our model, which is great. We're experimenting with it. Some are doing good, and some are also deliver really low quality. And my question is to basically to anybody who has experience with the same question, how to deal with that? Because, well, I'm willing to say, be inspired by what we do the same, and so on. But you also want really to have the quality of your own project. You want to see that in the other project as well. And you may call me naive, but also feel a little bit responsible about it, because we're dealing with children, and if you really mess it up, it may be harmful. So once I was at a place and I thought I created a monster. It was so bad there. And I felt responsible for something which I was not responsible for, which is a not so nice feeling to have. And I'm actually looking now, because we're facing this question and we're dealing with it, to successful models of projects who found a way to both inspire others and have some sort of, maybe not so strict as in your own project, but some sort of quality measures. And I'm myself thinking about saying, okay, we have our 9 schools, we support some others really seriously in a real relation. And with the others, that if they want to have our logo or if they want to be part of our network, they really should have this and this and that, or something like that.
Okay, thank you very much. Sheeta, is this an issue that you've encountered? And then maybe we'll ask if others in the room have encountered it too.
Yeah, so we have an organizational structure where actually two not-for-profits who jointly manage the program. So we've got our roles really, laid out, but the roles and responsibilities of each organization clearly laid out. And then there's a whole organizational structure. And we definitely look at quality within the classroom. So we have a baseline assessment test, and then we have an end-line assessment test. And we see how learning levels improve. And we don't leave it just to ourselves to assess. We even have third-party evaluations. And there we found that learning outcomes have improved by 10 to 20% from year after year, depending on whichever location you are in.
Thank you. I think I saw a hand here. And there's another question waiting, but I'll come to you in a second.
Hello, I'm the president of the American Community Schools of Athens, and we have created an Institute of Innovation, which is unique for the K-12 areas, but I want to bring a question on a different level. We see here islands of excellence, which is commendable. But have you ever thought about moving to the next level, creating a network between your networks, so therefore some of the challenges that one system faces, the other one might have a very simple answers, whether it is a quality of teaching, whether it is a quality of curriculum, whether it is a quality of the standards, as the father said over there. So eventually, we're not moving in different directions with different pockets of excellences. And finally, we move at the level where each of us, we don't reinvent the wheel every time, and we make our life a little bit easier, and therefore we spend more energy with the students that we want to serve.
Thank you very much. That's another great question. I'll ask you all to think about it for a second, but I'll also take the further question. There was a hand up at the back, to see how it fits in, and also give you guys a moment to reflect.
Thank you. My name is Abdullah, and I'm from Reach Out to Asia. My question is, in the earlier question, it was mentioned that we have created islands of excellence, which mostly are the initiatives from the NGOs or maybe from the corporate sector. Where is the government? My question would be, like, all these initiatives cannot be sustained in the longer run unless the government is involved, number one. Number two, is there any good example where we could say, like, these initiatives were actually institutionalized and ultimately handed over to the government to take over? Because NGOs probably cannot sustain this unless the financial resources are available. So, I mean, from my perspective, there would remain a challenge unless the government is not involved into it, and unless these are institutionalized.
Thank you very much. So those two questions are very strongly related to each other. Educational innovations can happen at a certain scale, and you've all achieved it. But when they are working, when they're motoring, when you know their properties and their qualities and maybe what they fit well with, how do we find ways of making that innovation truly systemic and perhaps developing our capacity for absorbing and making use of innovation in the process? And then, of course, where does government fit into that? Now, government is another huge question which we might devote a few more minutes to a bit later in the conversation as well. But let's start with Manuel. What's your response?
I will refer briefly to each one of the questions. I'm going to say something obvious, but this whole debate is about children, and innovation is just a way to making things better for them. It is not the purpose in itself. I think that the secret to not to take just pieces or islands of interesting things is sound planning, taking into account all the elements. And I'm not going to deepen into that because we all know what that means. Sound planning is a kind of like insurance to guarantee that the process will go all the way through, depending on its quality in one or the other direction. Going to the issue of the government, in the case of this organization called Las Golondrinas, golondrinas is a bird, the name in Spanish, the effort is very much linked to the government. The government assigns a certain amount of money every month per child, and the additional cost is put by this organization, so that link is fully guaranteed. But the government is learning things from this experience. This experience is bringing questions to the table of the government on an issue that I think is crucial, because the oldest owner of education in our countries is the state. NGOs and international organizations have brought early childhood development, and that's basically their contribution. But on basic education, the government is there, and it needs the fresh air of these kinds of contributions, innovative in many cases, brought by non-governmental organizations.
Thank you. Joe.
Thank you. I'd like to respond to the question from the Netherlands. I believe one of the things that's helped our network really place a tremendous emphasis on quality and effectiveness was the creation of our national board, which is composed of many business people with great experience. So, for example, the gentleman who created The City Never Sleeps, he was the president of Citibank in New York when ATM cards just came out. He's on our board, and he's always talking about branding. We have a name, Cristo Rey. It means something. Georgetown University, it means something to them. So we have to produce. We have to make sure that each of our schools is turning out students who are academically prepared. There's a conflict, I think. There's almost a dialectic, a concrete unfolding of linked but opposed principles. As you grow, you have the mission people, and you have the effectiveness people, the people with more business experience, and you'll run into an inevitable conflict, and that's not bad. As a matter of fact, it's good. It helps you get better. And I think one of the things that if you're going to scale, you have an innovative model, and you want to go to scale, know that you're going to run into barriers and conflicts. It's inevitable, and in point of fact, I think it's really good. In terms of the question that Stefanos asked from Athens, the WISE initiative has just begun this year, the creation of a WISE community for awards winners. So this was the 4th year that 6 organizations were honored. It's the first time that the previous winners were invited back to meet with the current winners. And the whole idea is that we will create a network and share best practices and things like how we scale up together, and hopefully we'll even widen that circle.
Thank you. Sheeta.
Yeah, I refer to the question about mainstreaming the innovation. That is extremely challenging, of course, with the, because to change policy, to change bills is going to be, to change the law is going to be difficult. So the way we have done it is that we've actually worked with the school, with the government school systems, with the children, but in an after-school support class. And what we've found is that once you partner with these schools and the teachers see that there are improvements in the children, they start learning and imbibing and accepting those changes and automatically use it within their classrooms themselves. So it's not formally institutionalized, but in a way we go around the system.
Okay, thank you. But before I do another few points, and there are some hands going up, let me just push all of you a little bit more on government, right? As the questioner said, government is ever present in our school systems. And I work for the head of a government, so, it's a part of everyone's daily reality. We cannot imagine educational solutions at a truly global scale without thinking about how to use governments effectively. But the starting point for each of your stories is government schools not doing their job. So why not just, with an innovation that has some power and some momentum to it, why not just bypass government and look for scale through alternative means?
In point of fact, that's what we do in the United States in the Cristo Rey movement. I know each country has a different history, but if you look at the history of the United States, government was not involved in creating our education system. All of our great most people don't realize the Ivy League schools were all religious-based schools originally. Georgetown University was started by the Jesuits and is still a Jesuit school. Many of the best inner-city schools are private schools and religiously based schools. And in point of fact, we value our independence tremendously. In each state of the United States, there's an association of independent schools that carefully protects its autonomy. And in many cases, these schools antedated state boards of education, state departments of education. And we think that's very important. So, for example, New York State has a series of Regents exams. The private schools are exempt from them. We do not think that they are the best system of assessments, and we do our own. Now, I know it's different in each country, but what we found is the partnership between philanthropy and business has really enabled our system to flourish. And I would encourage you to think about that. Business has a great interest in improving the educational system, and philanthropists and foundations have a great interest. When you get them working together, it's dynamite.
And just a very quick supplementary. So are you actually saying that you think that this can be done systemically without government?
I would like to suggest that we think about that.
Okay, all right. Manuel.
While he thinks about that, or we think about that, we have to say that in the emerging countries or the so-called third world countries, state is a critical actor in the education arena. And most of the kids go to public schools, and the greatest difficulty regarding its quality is in the public schools. That's the big challenge. Going back to Medellin and speaking about innovation and government, this city is something that I would like you to pay attention to. For instance, it has developed one of the few integrated transportation systems a city has, and it has included cable cars as part of their public transportation system. This is to tell you that it's looking forward, a creative government, and this is what the type of government we are talking to. So the dialogue is with a government that believes in education, wants to transform education, wants to make it more suitable for people, but I think that the role of non-governmental organizations is to contribute to that process when the government is taking the steps towards the bettering of the school systems, the educational systems, and the schools as part of it.
Thank you. Shita, and then we'll have some more questions from over that side.
I believe that especially if we're working with low-income, marginalized communities, you can't work without the government, because the outreach with the government, that's the only way you're going to reach out to the most marginalized communities. And there are a lot of governments, even in India, education is a state subject, and there are a lot of state governments who are really coming together, coming to corporates, so exactly what you're talking about. So we're looking at public-private partnerships as well. So we're looking at different models in different states. So finally, it would be a combination of all, but there's no way that the government can be left out.
Thank you. Okay, we'll start up here. We'll take a few.
Merci. C'est Monsieur Boyodé.
Thank you very much. My name is Mr. Bouyede from Togo, from Western Africa. I would like to bring my contribution to the discussion. In Togo, the possibilities of innovation are very often found in religious schools and in some private schools, which are well managed by their founders. But the bulk of the problem lies with the fact that many young people come from very disadvantaged, very poor backgrounds. More than 60% of school-age children cannot go to school on a regular basis because their parents have no money. They are too poor to pay for their tuition fees. So it was said in my countries that local communities should create and set up their own schools and management. And the first challenge that we had was that local communities recruited teachers in the community, but those teachers were not well trained. And they had no regular wages, and very often, starting from the very early months of the year, parents and families could no longer pay the salary of those teachers. And it is very difficult to build schools in those communities, but also to maintain those schools. And parents preferred to send their boys to schools, and girls were left at home. So that was another problem. How can we encourage parents to send girls to schools? One thing was maybe to have tuition fees that were cheaper. And so tuition fees were lowered, and the problem was that girls were sent to schools, but not boys anymore. So since we have many challenges, and since 2008, we decided to cancel all fees, in preschool level and in primary schools. And now, all children are going to school. And I think that the local communities should be involved in every endeavour that we make. Thank you very much.
A learning journey there involved in tackling those many challenges. Was there a question behind on this side? And then we'll come over.
Thank you. I'm Hasanur Rahman from Bangladesh, work with the NGO Dhaka Sene Mission. I bring to the discussion two challenges that we face. We work with the government as well in the replication of the models. One is there are many good practices at the grassroots level, at the ground level, but in many cases, the documentation of the process are not available. And when these are attempted to go for replication or scale up, the technical support for use of those model or application of those model are not available. That's one. Second is about whole flexibility or scope for adapting of the brand. When you say good practice in the field of education, it cannot be just take and copy it. It needs to be adapted to suit the local context. In many cases, it happens, the brand owner really just approaches, you take it or don't take it. You can't distort the model. So that flexibility aspect is very, very important to adapt it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So over on this side, can I go here? Yeah. No. Yeah. Take you and then we'll go there. That's okay.
Merci bien. Je voudrais intervenir.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to talk about the involvement of the state and governments. I come from Burkina Faso and I represent a Swiss NGO. We have set up an educational innovation which includes local languages, local African languages, in order to improve quality and standards. But since we are in a very disadvantaged background in both Burkina Faso and the whole sub-region, we systematically had to cooperate closely with governments. In poorer countries, it's more difficult to have governments out of the scene because we can't really scale up without the government support. And we were lucky enough to have meaningful participation and support from governments. And governments have now taken ownership of the innovation practice, and it is now part of the budget. The educational legislation was amended by the government, and there have been many innovations, including in higher education. And it is now also being introduced in teaching schools, especially for primary school teachers. So this system was scaled up by the government. So the civil society had a very good idea, which then inspired the government, and the government was a guarantee of maintaining the innovation. So I think one should create good synergies and fruitful cooperation between governments and civil society.
And to you.
My name is Abad Andalusi from Morocco. I am the founder of an NGO which aims to stimulate entrepreneurial spirit of youth. WISE took a very, very good decision to commission experts from innovation unit to make research and to write a book about 15 best practices around the world in education for work. So my question is how to share widely about this best practice, how to communicate. And as for me, I would like just to suggest one thing. It's only the case for the WISE Award winner project. Why we can't, why WISE, for example, this is a suggestion for WISE, to send this book to all the Minister of Education, to encourage them to support such project or to implement such project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The expert that you mentioned is sitting just here, so we might ask her if she has a thought about spreading some of those lessons a bit later. I've got one more question right in the front row, and then I'll come back to the panel and start with Joe. There are a number of questions that you might want to respond to. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Michael Da Costa Bab. I'm a director of a tech startup called schools.com, it's 5 O's, which is education software from Portugal. I also teach at Católica University in Portugal as well. My question is about the money. It really is about how do we empower these business models so that they're not so dependent. You talked about innovation being just there for the children. From my perspective, I think that's one very good argument. And yes, we're there to improve the experience, the learning experience of children. But that innovation also has a value. And that could be a market value. It could be marketable. It could attract investment. And it could lead to sustainability. It's maybe linked to this idea of smart education. There's lots of talk of smart cities at the moment. You can't have smart cities without smart educated people. I would suggest or put to the audience here. So, yeah, my notion is about, let's talk about the money, the business, please.
We'll talk about money and give it some real attention before the end of the session. Thank you. So, let me come back to the panel, maybe starting with Joe. There are several things you might want to respond to, but specifically I'm asking you because documentation came up, and you talked about the role of consultants and feasibility. How should we think about the role of expert advice and the documentation of what actually works?
Yeah, I think if you want to go to scale, you have to be very careful how you document what has to be done. I mentioned before feasibility studies. So, for example, our network has online the outline, the template for a feasibility study. So any group in a particular city that's thinking about creating a Cristo Rey school, they're told, go look at that website and put together a feasibility team and do everything that is outlined there. Within that, it makes very clear what the outline of the school has to be. So I think we do give good data on that. I agree with the gentleman from up top that flexibility is required. I think I mentioned that before. There can often be the founding people can hold on too tightly to exactly what they wanted. So you want to have some adaptability. On the other hand, you have to have standards. So you're not going to really be scaling up if the other schools that try to join your network are completely unlike your own.
And just to push it along a little bit further, do you find that if you get the pro bono advice from, leading international management consultants and other experts who can really crunch this up and give you detailed documents, does anyone out there in the world of practice actually take any notice of them?
Yes. For example, our first school got started in Chicago. The Jesuits wanted to do something for the Mexican immigrant community. They went to the Cardinal Archbishop, Cardinal Bernardine, who gave them a closed parish with a nice little piece of property. And then the Jesuits got McKinsey & Company, the famous international consulting company, to do a pro bono study of the community. What did the parents want for their children? And it came back very clearly that they wanted a small Catholic college preparatory school for their children.
Thank you. Shita?
On the flexibility side, I would say that yes, I totally agree, because we are in both urban India and in rural India, and we're finding that the strategy is now changing slightly between the two, because in rural and tribal parts of India, what we do in the classroom is actually we're providing the girls with an opportunity to do homework or revision or practice, and they don't have the luxury of this time and space in their own homes. Whereas in urban India, there is an opportunity, even though they live in slums, their parents have a little bit of literacy skills, so they can help them out. So we do need to be flexible and adapt according to where you are.
Okay. Thank you. Manuel.
I want to make reference to two of the questions. The one from our friend from Burkina Faso regarding the role of the government and how do we relate to the government. I think that speaking of Latin America, we are seeing increasingly that the landing strip of many innovations is public policy. Understanding that public policy is the policy that is the result of a dialogue between the government and the civil society. It is not something that the government imposes. So the best way that we can use of innovations is bringing them to the course of that wide river that is government action. Public policy then. I very strongly believe in that.
And how practically can we do that when governments in many countries are distracted, they're fragmented, they've got their own recruitment problems? What lessons are there to actually bring them to focus on the potential of these innovations and working them through in the way that they need to be?
I think that we move into politics. And speaking of politics, I think that in the case of Colombia or other countries like Brazil, there are democratic instruments, the institutionalization of mechanisms that allow that dialogue. It is not easy. It is not something that happens automatically. It means some tension at times. But if we see what has happened over the last 15, 20 years, I think we are increasingly seeing that government is paying attention to that or accepting suggestions of things that have been proving in practice.
Okay, thank you.
Quickly, speaking about the question that was made about local community schools, this is a big thing. I think that fortunately in our region, we already have gone through the experience of seeing that when local communities get involved in education, the result is much better. The experience I am bringing shows that the formula has to be local communities along with governments walking towards the same direction.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, we've got about 20 minutes left, so let me just give one small challenge to the audience to see whether you want to come in on a last set of questions in a few moments. And then I'm going to ask you to answer a specific question about money. But just to get you thinking, it seems to me that there may be one broad area, one quite fundamental area that we haven't yet touched on in this debate as much as we should. If we're thinking about scaling up innovation and being able to absorb it effectively into our systems, we do have to think about the broad mass of people, the teachers, who are mediating every day between students and the curriculum and the education system around them. And there are some big questions. We've kind of touched on them, but there are some big questions about whether or not our teaching force is prepared to pick up on the kind of compelling potential of these specific innovations, and how it is that they become engaged, and maybe what specific methods and tools we need that don't exist in their toolbox today. So I just ask you to think about that, because I don't think we should close the discussion without having touched on it. But before we come to those questions, we did hear about money, and money is important. Let me ask the three of you, what kind of investor do we need? Are there particular lessons about the structure of finance that you need in order to be able to pursue your strategies and scale them up effectively over time? Maybe Sheeta.
The way we have done our financing is that we've actually designed the program as a sponsorship program. So any individual or corporate can sponsor a girl's education for a year. So we provide the girl with academic support, with material support, and because we are reaching out to so many, so we use the efficiencies of economies of scale, and so we managed to, we've come out with a sponsorship cost of only $60 to sponsor a girl for 1 year if she's in primary school, and $90 if she's in secondary school. So what we're doing is that we are mitigating the risk of, having one big donor who comes in for, say, 3 years and then suddenly pulls out. So we believe that we can do this and reach out to many more smaller donors who will continuously, continue supporting the child right up till the time she completes her schooling. Of course, how do we get the word out? It is, there are challenges, but that's the model we're using so far.
Okay, thank you. Joe?
Two things I'd like to point out. We do have a mailing list, and we have lots of individual donors, some of whom give quite substantial gifts. But the majority of our financing comes from the business community and the foundation community. And what we've tried to do, and I would suggest to everybody, is try to figure out what your needs are and how they match up with the desires of the business community. So in the United States, businesses are trying to diversify their workforce. They feel they do not have enough women, they do not have enough African Americans, they do not have enough Hispanics. So we, in effect, become a pipeline for these companies. So one of our first class graduated from high school in 2008, from college in 2012. Abiezer Mendez, whose family is from the Dominican Republic, worked at J.P. Morgan Chase when he was a student with us. He had a scholarship to Fordham University, largely funded by the family of the former CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase, which gave him a part-time job during the school year in college, a full-time job every summer, and he started a full-time job there 2 weeks after he graduated. So that's a clear example of how our needs match up with the needs of a company. Secondly, in terms of foundations, you want to find foundations whose mission aligns with your mission. So the Altman Foundation is very big in New York City. I know the woman who's the chair of that, and when I described our school as we were about to open, she said, your mission is the same as our mission. It's one word, access. We'll be with you, and they have been with us to the tune of $100,000 every year with no sign of leaving off. So you want to align needs and align mission.
Thank you. Manuel.
And I think we come back to the totally different reality, because in our countries, the main source of funding has to be the state through the government. Now, how do we make that better than it has been for so many years? I think that we are finding new mechanisms, and an interesting one is the so-called participatory budget distribution. Brazil was the leader in that. It started many years ago in the southern part of Brazil, and now it has become something that is all over the country. Colombia is doing the same, so simple people in communities have the possibility to influence how the public budget is distributed, but the main source continue being the state.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a few more questions. We'll start here.
I just want to commend the three speakers for the incredible programs that they're working with and that they've developed. And as you know, Father Parks is a very good friend of mine. In fact, he serves on a board at Georgetown University, which I chair. But I'm going to disagree with him a little bit here about the role of government.
Please.
Because I think that we need to draw a distinction when we talk about government, and I think Manuel is doing it, between the direct role of government and the indirect role of government. In the United States, everything that Joe said about philanthropy is accurate, and the private sector is accurate, but it depends upon a tax exemption for contributions to institutions such as Cristo Rey. Without that tax exemption, and we may learn a lot about this in the next 6 to 12 months because there's a lot of talk about eliminating the tax exemption for private philanthropy. That could radically transform the viability of Cristo Rey. And so there's an ecosystem out there. The other part of the ecosystem is the default. Who takes care of the disabled and the kids with autism and things like that? I'm on a board of such a school in New York. It's the government. There's no amount of private money that takes care of those special needs people. So I know Joe recognizes this. And even at Georgetown and the private universities, which is the goal of the Cristo Rey program, much of our financing comes from federal subsidies, again, dependent upon the tax code. And the final point about teachers. We are thrilled in the United States, Joe and I share this view, about a group called Teach for America, which is developing a cohort of teachers, motivated young people to do great things. It really depends on the tax code, because the people who support Teach for America are getting a tax deduction. So there is a lot of federal policy in the United States, which is the government hidden. And Manuel's talking about similar things in Colombia, and I think Sheeta's talking about similar things in India.
Yeah.
It gets to be very complicated.
Thank you. We'll go here next and then up there, so just right in the front row. But, you know, from those points, maybe we're used to thinking about government as the direct provider, the direct controller, the kind of big behemoth in the middle. But actually you're saying there's a whole range of roles and relationships that we have to think through here in both developed and developing countries. Thank you. Yeah.
I'd like to have two comments. First of all, my name is Abdulaziz Al-Kindi, Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs from the University of Nizwa in Oman, which is a private or non-governmental institution. The first comment I'd like to make, I think we need to strike an optimization between deregulation and regulation for the government role. I think there are two models, or there is an in-between model now, more and more the call for it, either too much government intervention or very less government support. The need to support, which I will agree with my colleague here. So if we can strike that balance, I think we will be able to bring a better atmosphere of innovation for education. The second comment is, if we think where we are heading as Mother Earth as a whole, or mankind, I think sustainability and education are two major factors which we need to put more innovation into. We do have a problem. We have to recognize that there is, I can I'm a biologist and I'd like to characterize it that there is an obligated parasite infection across the globe, which is caused by two, in my opinion, and we should not hide from it, because when you talk about finance and money, look at where the money and the finance goes. The first of all, the wagers of wars, whether they are state-sponsored or group-sponsored, where there is huge, endless drain of finances where we can direct them, and we are obligated to direct them to a sustainability and education. We are on the catastrophe now, on the verge of another collapse, universal collapse from climatic change. Research is telling us if we do not do more in sustainability and education and change the attitude and thinking of mankind, then we are. I think innovation and sustainability, along in education as a vehicle, they should play a role there. We should get support from stopping those wars and telling the groups and the states behind it, where trillions and trillions now of dollars, not any longer billions. The second part where the finance is really drained, and we keep talking about where we get the resources for education. We cannot. I agree with all of you there in the panel and the group and the audience. We can do more in the civil society, in the government, the balances, and more involvement in private sector, as our colleague's father there is telling. But one fact beside wars remain, that 10% of mankind owns 90% of the wealth. And if you can think about the initiative of Sheikh Hamouze, now covering 500,000, maybe covers millions, can we think about these multinational companies which are bombarding us with this neo-capitalism, the dangerous neo-capitalism, which is directing us as mankind toward consumerism rather than noble causes of education and innovation?
Okay.
I think these are important to come in the discussion, and we need to put, so if we can retain a fraction of where the money and the finances is drawn there, I can assure you, and many here will agree, that we will solve a lot of our problems, sustainability and education.
Thank you very much. Thank you. If we can take the microphone up here. And then I'm going to come to our panel for closing comments after this next intervention. And I'm going to ask you what you think is the most powerful thing we can focus on in order to scale up and adapt and adopt more effectively. But Valerie Hannon from the Innovation Unit in the UK is the lead author of this year's WISE book, Learning a Living. What strikes you about this discussion and where we need to focus if we're going to scale up more effectively?
Thanks, Tom. As Mr. Andalusi pointed out, in our book, we do, after a scan of around about 50 or so interesting innovations in the whole issue of learning a living. By the way, it's not vocational education and training, it's about learning at all levels, school right through to technical, postgraduate, PhD level, which enable people to effectively operate within our economies. We selected 15 examples, and we did attend very particularly to the issue of scale, so I found today's conversation extremely interesting. The last two chapters of the book look at what are the factors which enable innovation to go to scale. So I perhaps encourage people to look at that, and I won't go through those points, there are about 10 of them. But I want to make 3, maybe 4 in the context of this discussion. The first, I want to kind of very much endorse the last speaker's comments from Oman, which I think were absolutely spot on. But it has to do with the issue of context. If you take our set of 15 examples, they range from Finland to Brak in Bangladesh. And if you think about the range that that encompasses, in one instance you have Finland, a system where everything is state-funded, where the government is absolutely committed to a first-class education system and is interested and open to innovation arising from all kinds of spaces. At the other end of the continuum, you have contexts where there is absolute government failure. And it's the case that Brak has been able to become the largest NGO in its scale to the degree that it has $650 million turnover a year, because in many countries of the world, government has abjectly failed to conduct its responsibilities. So it's absurd, really, to talk about what is the role of government. It will depend on the context and the history that we are all facing. In the final part of our book, we look at what kinds of conditions governments can create whether they are in advanced, so-called advanced, or at least rich countries, and have taken those responsibilities seriously, or whether they are evolving and rethinking what they might be, or indeed in the United States, where there continues to be a raging argument about what the appropriate role of government should be. So we see it as one of creating enabling conditions, not necessarily providing, not necessarily regulating to a certain formula, but looking at those contexts very carefully. The second issue I want to make is also to do with context, I think, and it has to do with what the panel have very interestingly discussed in terms of adaptation. I think every innovator needs to determine fairly early on the degree to which they can specify what is absolutely at the core, at the heart of what it is that they are doing, and which aspects of it are capable of adaptation to context. So context comes back again. At what point can you say these points are essential for fidelity, and we won't compromise on them, they're fundamental to our quality. But these other points, so around the circumference, if you like, can be adapted, and probably the innovation will be improved as a result in different contexts to do so. And again, only the innovators can decide that, but it's essential, I think, that they do it fairly early on. The third point I want to make is that not every innovation is good. Some of them we ought to have considerable concerns about, I think. So we have already discussed some of the issues around values, and personally I have considerable concern about some of the innovation that's going on in the United Kingdom, in which you see chains of schools arising, which I would describe as fairly anti-educational, actually. So coming back to the role of government, there's an issue about enabling consumers, and more broadly, regulators, to think about how we evaluation or change that's arising sometimes in quite a freed up system. I'll just make one final point about finance. When we looked at our innovators, we were very struck about how very early on, and by the way, this is irrespective of whether they operate within a state sector or whether they're fundamentally philanthropic non-profits, but they were thinking entrepreneurially from the outset. They were thinking about how they might achieve a mix of funding streams and how they might make that sustainable. And I come back again to my colleague here who made these points from Oman. I thought they were brilliant. I think that this spirit of entrepreneurialism, which particularly marks Mr. Abad Andalusi's work, is going to characterise educators going forward. And I say again, irrespective of whether that's in the state sector or beyond it, because we know that levels of funding in the public services are not going to continue to rise without limit. And I think that we need to consider ourselves as educators as being part of an entrepreneurial class who need to think about education as embedded in our broader civic society in a completely different way. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we've heard many things, aired many issues. Manuel, beginning with you, where do you think we need to focus in order to learn to do this more effectively?
Thank you. I just want to say that Brazil has approved a law by which 10% of GDP will go to education, and Brazil is the sixth economy in the world. So that is good news, and we should pay a lot of attention to what's happening in that country. I would like to add 2 words to what our friend just said.
We're going to finish up.
Yeah.
Less than 5% in the Arab world. That's a good point.
Right. About the rest of the Latin American countries too. Context, yes, but culture and historical circumstances are essential when we speak about replication and adaptation of innovations we see. I think this is a key thing, especially in this globalized world, when we have the opportunity to meet in events like this, where people come from such a diverse country situations, taking into account that which we have learned a long time ago and keep it on the top of our minds, I think it is something that we should always do.
Thank you very much. Joe.
The thing I would suggest to people thinking about scaling up, mission and management do not necessarily have to be in conflict. Often there will be tension. Be prepared for that tension. But ultimately, they work hand in glove, and without both of them, the scaling up will never work.
Terrific, thank you. Sheeta.
Yeah, I think I'd like to add to Father's statement, because I think to scale up, I think you need to have leadership, you need to have a vision, you need to have proper goals, and to to ensure that those goals are reached, you need to have an organizational structure, you need to have planning, and the proper funding support. So I think that's what one is required to really take any innovation up to scale.
Wonderful. One suggestion that has come in from the tweet is that for WISE, with now such a collection of projects and individuals and groups who are directly engaged in driving and shaping innovation, that some form of interactive database of projects and lessons to be learned might be a good part of the mix that's already been established through the awards and the book and the many other things that the agenda has already achieved. So that may be food for more thought. But I think that we've achieved a good conversation and a genuine sharing across a global set of perspectives on why it is that this focus on both adopting and adapting really matters for the future of education, and how it is that we might go about trying to do those things more systematically together. So thank you all very much for coming, and thank you for your many contributions, but thank you in particular to our fantastic panel of speakers. Thank you.